Hello and welcome back. This is Alana Adventure, and today we're going to go over the new Spelljammer adventure, Light of Xaryxis. Now, this adventure was just released here in 2022, and it was written by Christopher Perkins. Now, this adventure is designed for level 5 players, and it's made in a way to sort of introduce players that aren't familiar with Spelljammer or aren't already part of the Spelljammer universe into Spelljammer itself. And the way it does that is you can set this beginning in whatever universe you want to. It starts off in a tavern that's supposed to be in a port town that has access to water. Now, this is sort of important for the following reasons. While the players are sitting there having their wonderful, great time, as adventures always do, the sky will all of a sudden light up as hundreds of comets just come streaming down from the sky and impacting the planet. Now, one of the people your players are supposed to have been hanging out with and interacting before this is a sailor named Alana Sartel. Now, as these comets are landing, where they land, all of a sudden these crystalline tentacles start coming out of there, crystalline vines. They start coming out of there and they start going all over the planet. And out of these vines also pop out these astral blights. They're pretty much like space crystal zombies. They're zombies with a better armor class, and they don't come back after they've been killed. Now, Sartel will see this, look at the players and say, I'm getting the hell out of here. Come with me if you'd like. I'm going to my ship. Now, Perkins includes in here the multiple ways the players could respond. They can try and fight the blights as they appear, which isn't going to work out well because Perkins has it so if they fight the blights, more blights will show up and they will continue fighting blights pretty much until they die. They can head to the docks with the sailor. They can hole up, in which case one of the earthquakes and tremors that are happening because of these giant crystalline vines that are showing up everywhere will knock the house apart and they'll have to run away, which leads back to fighting the blights, heading to the docks, or they could make a run for the outskirts. No matter what they do, eventually they will end up being on Sartel's ship. Should the players head to the docks, they will also end up having a wonderful encounter with the local crime lord named Travis and his gang of thugs. These guys don't really have that much of an impact on the storyline in general. They're like an outside NPC. The DM, you, could involve them more if you wish. Suffice to say, the players should be able to defeat Travis and his gang, or they'll end up being on the ship with the player characters and this Sartel lady. Now, should the players have decided to head for the outskirts instead of ending up at the docks in the beginning, they will instead be rescued by Sartel because, amazingly enough, the ship that they thought was just a normal water ship, well, that's a Spelljammer. Sartel is not from this realm of existence, and her galleon ship is not just a normal galleon, it's a flying galleon spaceship with a Spelljammer helm. So like I said, no matter what decision the players make, they're supposed to end up on this ship. And that's the end of Chapter 1. Now, there is 12 chapters in this entire adventure, and it is split into 4 different parts. Now, I should also mention that this entire adventure is only 64 pages long, which they fit a lot inside of here, but it's sort of one directional, almost railroady, but not truly railroady because Perkins puts in multiple ways the adventure could go. I'm just going over a general idea of the story, so we all got the parts. And now we're on to part 2. In part 2, as the players are escaping the planet, their ship, the galleon they're on, will be accosted by this other ship called a Star Moth. Now, this Star Moth has astral elves on it. They're space elves. They're like high elves and dark elves and all that stuff. except they're in space. Now, these space elves, the astral elves, they will attack the galleon. There's a reason for this. See, the entire crystalline, vines that are coming out, along with the entire thing, was done by these astral elves. These elves are part of an empire whose sun is dying, and what they do is they go to other planets and absorb all, their magical energy and everything else like that, using these crystal seeds that they, drop as, bombs onto each planet. And out of these crystal seeds come those blights that come out of there that attack all the flora and fauna on the planet as the vines continue to dig into the core of the planet itself. And they take all that energy and they shoot it back towards their empire so they can put it all back into their dying sun so they can continue to live on. So space elves equal bad guys. So anyways, these space elves, they're on board this modelless ship called a Star Moth. This Star Moth moves faster than the space galleon that you're on, and it will attack the space galleon. There'll be a fight. This is where they'll be able to capture some of the astral elves to question them on what's going on, in which case this is when they then figure out the entire reason why there's these crystal vines with crystal space zombies attacking everybody on their planet. This is also the chapter where eventually Sartel will give them into an introduction to how spelljamming works, what's required to make the spelljamming helm operate, and everything else that the players need for a basic understanding on how spelljamming does, the spelljamming part. And that's it for Chapter 2. We are now on to Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is pretty much where Sartel tells the players that they're going to go to this nearby spelljamming facility / colony, whatever the heck you want to call it. It's a giant asteroid with a spelljamming city on it, called the Rock of Brawl. Now, on the way to the Rock of Brawl, they're going to run into a nautiloid. Now, a nautiloid is usually a spelljamming ship that is used by mind flayers. But this nautiloid is currently derelict and looks pretty much, messed up. Now, Sartel will want the players to be part of a crew that goes aboard the destroyed nautiloid to see if they can get any salvage out of it. She pretty much press gangs the players into becoming part of the boarding crew. Now, they can refuse all they want to, but if they refuse, Sartel goes onto the nautiloid by herself, in which case they will then not be able to hear from her, and all of a sudden they'll see this human come onto the bow of the ruined ship and wave at him. He's got a bloody shirt and all that stuff, so eventually the players have to go on to the nautiloid anyways. The entire nautiloid thing is just a setup because the human is actually a disguised, parasitic, spelljamming species. It's a trap. The whole thing's a trap. Now, there's a little bit of treasure on here, plus one breastplate, that sort of stuff. But it's just it's like another way to introduce players to other races in the spelljamming, universe. Now, once they get done with this small encounter, they will then go back to this ship, in which case it will then be attacked by Neogi raiders. Now, the raiders encounter doesn't happen because this is the end of Chapter 3. Chapter 4 begins with the player starting off at the same point. The Neogi raiders are about to attack the ship when all of a sudden 3 space galleons come out of the asteroid field. They're part of a patrol from the Rock of Brawl. They scare the raiders off, then they talk to the people on the ship, then they offer to escort everybody to the Rock of Brawl. Suffice to say, the players make it to the Rock of Brawl. Once they get there, Sartel will then remove them from her ship and tell them, you should probably go talk to this guy on this rock called Commodore Crux. Now, Commodore Crux is actually a GIF, and this GIF has a ship. Now, when you speak to Crux, he'll listen to your story, and he will actually want to help you with your problem. Now, he'll tell you, let's go to my ship, we'll go board it, we'll see if we can get some friends together, then we'll go defeat this evil space elf empire together, because they're bad guys and we need to get rid of them. And off they go to his ship. They get to his ship, they board it, and there's a problem that the players need to solve. See, unfortunately, Crux's ship has already been rented out to this tiefling. The tiefling isn't very happy about her renting period being cut short, so the players need to negotiate using persuasion or money or a combination of both to have her give up the rest of her renting period. And this tiefling could care less about the plight of your planet about to be destroyed by crystalline vines coming out of it. Now, once they solve this problem and work their way past it, they'll get on board the Crux's Spelljammer called the Second Wind, and they'll go off into space. And this is where the Giff will inform everybody that he doesn't actually have a way to get to the actual empire, but he knows that there's supposed to be some sort of coalition of ships that are trying to fight the said evil empire in this place called Doom Space. There's another problem with this whole issue is he doesn't know how to get to Doom Space either, but he knows somebody that does know how to go to Doom Space, so that's where the players go next. And that is the end of Chapter 4. And Chapter 5 begins right where Chapter 4 ended. Chapter 5 takes the players from their current location at the Rock of Brawl to where they need to go all the way to the edge of this new realm of existence called Wild Space. And in Wild Space is this rock. And on this rock is a funny looking tower that's occupied by this Spelljammer astronomer. And this astronomer's name is Topola. And Topola is a friend of Crux. You'll make your way to the rock, up to the tower, where Topola will greet you, and she will tell you, hey, I don't have a way to get to Doom Space, but I have this cool little mechanism that'll help you find your way there. The only thing you need to do with this whole thing to pay me back is you need to defeat this local monster. And the players, being the good sorts they are, will end up fighting this monster even if they don't want to, because it pretty much ambushes them the second they leave this rock on their Spelljammer. It's this giant space jammer whale called a Void Scaver. Now, once they defeat this Void Scaver, Topola will also remember that she has some information that may also help the players, because she knows this one guy who has a fleet of ships. She leaves out the part that this one guy is also her ex, who also is a vampire, or a vampirate. Sounds scary, but vampirates aren't like true vampires that we know. They're kind of like weaker, less efficient versions of vampires that wander around space as pirates. So, like I said, vampirates. Don't blame me. I did not make up the word. Now, no matter if the players decide to take her advice and speak to this guy, who is named Garganhail, by the way, or if they decide not to, they will have to deal with it anyways, because as they're traveling through astral space, they will end up coming upon some wreckage. And this wreckage, Topola will inform you, appears to be the remnants of Garganhal's fleet. Garganhal, I guess it doesn't really matter how you say it. And they will eventually either A, go looking for his flagship, which isn't part of the wreckage, or B, be attacked by his flagship if they don't go looking for it. Now, once they find him or he finds them, there'll be this entire part where the ships will run into each other. He'll ask to board their ship. There'll be an entire negotiation process about getting him to join them on trying to form this fleet to defeat the evil space elves. And eventually he'll agree. One way or another, he'll end up agreeing because you have like advantage on like a charisma 15 check to convince him to join your team, especially if you have his ex-girlfriend with you. And pretty much right after he agrees, his ship mutinies against him because the ghost that's on the ship was actually possessing one of the current crew members on your ship, and he relays to the vampirate captain that he has led them to too many false victories and too many of them died, so they've decided to call it quits and disappear with the ship. Thus leads an entire chase sequence where they chase the ship, they board the ship, they fight it. There might be a 50-50 chance of an explosion completely blowing up his old ship, and everybody survives. Or they all die. It's either or. But more than likely, they will all end up surviving. Just with one ship, though. However, during the entire boarding process and defeating all the mutineers, Garganhall will lead the players to the brig where he has this prisoner that he says will help them in the whole fight against the evil empire because he's got this space elf princess in the brig. Now, he doesn't know it's a space elf princess, but she will end up informing everybody after the fact that she's the heir to the space elf empire. The problem is, though, her twin brother is also the heir to the space elf empire, and he's apparently a little bit more evil than she is and stabbed her in the back. She's able to give a little bit more information on the entire process of how the crystalline vines and everything else and how their entire power transfer system works. It pretty much solidifies the whole fact that the players need to go to the Space Elf Empire to make it so their planet does not get destroyed. And that's where that chapter ends, which was actually chapter 6. And chapter 7 begins, which is also part 2 of this adventure. Now, in chapter 7, also the beginning of part 2, the players actually make it into Doomspace using that, space navigational item that astronomer gave everybody. Now, once they get there, the gift Crux will say that he needs to make contact with his old buddy, Warwick Blastomoff, who was one of his old, battle buddies back in the day, and he's supposed to be organizing this entire coalition fleet to go defeat the bad guys. Well, they find him on a planet where he's currently getting hunted by the locals, and they rescue him. They pull him up on the ship, and he tells everybody, hey, yeah, there's no coalition, there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing out here. But I know a guy who knows a guy that may be able to help us. At this point, this entire adventure has been a series of, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who also knows a guy who may know something about this one such a thing. So anyways, that ends up ending chapter 7, and now we're going into chapter 8. And this is where Warwick tells you that you need to go to this guy named Vokoth, who is a Mercane, which is a species in the Spelljammer universe, who is currently running everything and is the head merchant for all of Doomspace because of how messed up it is, but he's the only person willing to trade with everybody, so he's also got the most influence in the region. And to get his support, you need to go to his base to figure out what he wants. Now, Vokoth the Mercane, he has this base that's floating up in the skies. You go up there, and you figure out that Vokoth's thing is, he likes blood sports, and he has an entire gladiatorial arena. When you show up, his guards will speak to the players. The players will say, hey, we'd like to speak to him. They'll be teleported into his office. He'll talk to him, be like, hey, that's not really my problem. But if you're able to defeat 3 rounds without having to take a rest, I'll set you up with a meeting with all the other leaders of the factions in the area, and you can speak to them all individually to try and get them on your side. I don't care either way. Now, obviously, the players have to agree to this, otherwise they're stuck, their planet gets destroyed, and the entire adventure's over. The players will go through a series of combats in this arena, each one progressively harder than the previous one. And the final battle is against this giant space centipede thing. Now, after they defeat this giant space centipede, everybody's going to be cheering for how great they did, and all of a sudden the roof of the arena will collapse as the prince of the evil space elves comes in on a solar dragon and demands that his sister be returned to him because she needs to be there for the coronation. All sorts of weird politics that goes over inside the book. I'm not going to go in too far detail about it. Any way that you try and change how this encounter occurs, your characters either A, die and this entire base gets destroyed, or B, what's supposed to happen is the sister goes with her brother onto the ship and she ends up leaving her ring on the sands of the arena for the players to use in the future. Should even send a telepathic message to all the players at once telling them, hey, you need my ring, come save me. And thus ends Chapter 8, and now we're into Chapter 9. Chapter 9 pretty much consists of the players sort of doing diplomacy with all the representatives from the separate factions to get them to join this coalition fleet to go fight the evil space elves. There's some rules in it and how you're supposed to change the influence of the players versus the NPC groups. But it really doesn't change the entire end battle at all, no matter how many of these groups you get to join. This is all just fluff. All of it is fluff. And once you're done, as you're going back to your Spelljammer, this red dragon will come out, land on one of the platforms of Volkos base, and a Githyanki Knight will jump off of it. Now, this Githyanki Knight seems important because that's how Chapter 9 ends, but it isn't. We begin Chapter 10 with the Knight jumping off the red dragon, confronting the players, making a joke how she's supposed to behead one of them, but doesn't, and just ends up asking them if they've seen any mind flayers around. If they say no, she's like, alright, cool, and leaves. If they end up telling her about their entire thing, how they're trying to fight these astral elves, you'd be like, okay, go tell them I hate them too. Gives them a bottle of oil of sharpness, and then also leaves. She has absolutely no point. The only thing you get out of this entire interaction is you get a single use of oil of sharpness. It seemed really cool in the beginning when you ended the last chapter with a red dragon coming down with this knight in gold armor stepping off of it, but it actually has no purpose. So you formed up this entire fleet, you go to the capital, your ships get into combat with the evil space elves, fleet of ships, there's a battle, your ship just faces off against the enemy capital ship, duke it out. As you defeat the enemy capital ship, some solar dragons come out, you're able to scare them off with the ring or fight them off. None of it matters. Your fleet gets destroyed, and your characters either surrender or they sneak into the capital. And either way, the characters will end up being involved in the coronation process if they sneak in or if they get caught, because the princess demands them as her representatives for a trial for combat over whether or not she should be in charge or if the prince should be in charge. If the players sneak in, her brother will announce to everybody that her say doesn't matter because she doesn't have her signet ring of power that gives her influence in the whole matter, in which case she'll say it is here and she'll magically point the direction of her ring, which your player characters are holding. Or they'll been captured from the battle because they surrendered after their entire fleet was destroyed, in which case the player characters will be in front of her, in which case she will claim them as her champions for the battle. Doesn't matter. No matter what you do, your player characters end up having to fight in this whole like fight for who's going to take charge of this whole evil space elf empire. The prince also chooses his champion, which ends up being like this black armored construct that is pretty tough. And if the player characters win this trial of combat, the princess will thank them and tell them their gift is that she's going to arrest them and have them executed. If they lose this trial of combat because this black armored construct doesn't like killing things, they will be knocked unconscious. They will be awakened by the prince, who will then tell them, hey, guess what? You're going to be executed. So no matter which twin wins, the end result is supposed to be they're executed. But wait, there is more. The black armored construct is actually like a family heirloom that's been with the family for generations, can cast wish once. And with that wish, it brings all the health points back to the player characters. They get the benefits of like a full restoration. There's no negative effects going on. And he announces that the entire evil elf, space elf empires, like princes and royal families, are all corrupt. And then he falls apart. Then it leads to a battle between what's left of the royal guards versus the players at full hit points. The twins run away and escape, screaming like little children. And then after everybody's been defeated, your player characters are sitting there. They've got one of the rings of power that they have, which is actually like a ring of shooting stars, which the black armored, construct said before it collapsed, they need to throw it into the sun to destroy it. I'm getting some real Lord of the Rings vibes from this, but so be it. Now, there's a problem here. To get the ring into the star, a player needs to sacrifice themselves. Should a player not want to sacrifice themselves, that vampire from earlier in the adventure that really had no freaking purpose, the one that's like the ex-boyfriend of the astronomer, he will volunteer to go into this beam of light that goes into the sun to save the player character's planet and to prove that he actually is a good person even though he's a vampire. Now, doing this saves your player character's planet, wherever it destroys the capital of the evil space elves. There are multiple variations of this. Perkins actually puts in what happens if the prince wins, the players don't do what they're supposed to do, what happens if they decide to spare the capital. Pretty much if they decide to spare the capital, their planet is dead. If they decide to let the prince win, their planet is dead. No matter what choice the players make, a lot of people are going to die. They can either decide to save the people from their planet, or they can save these astral space elves. I personally would save my own planet, because I'm sort of selfish like that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and go into rating this adventure. For the adventure rating, I'm going to go ahead and give this a 4 out of 5. Yes, I know some of y'all may not agree with me, but it is a very good way to introduce the players into spelljamming if they've never been involved in spelljamming before. It introduces a lot of the races, the dangers of spelljamming, and all the basic mechanics for them to know. For value, I'm going to go ahead and give this a 2 out of 5. Now, I got this as part of the bundle that just came out that cost me like $70 or whatever it was. It's an okay adventure. By itself, I would probably at most pay $30 for it. But I would not buy this bundle just for this adventure. For deadliness factor, this is getting a 1 out of 5. This adventure is not really all that deadly. Not to mention it's designed for 5th edition. But even beyond that, Perkins has put in like ways to get around any difficulties they have. This entire adventure is designed as an introduction into Spelljammer itself. It's sort of interesting, kind of fun. I find some of the aspects of it kind of weak, I guess the word is I'm looking for. It's okay. It's a good introductory adventure into Spelljammer. And it's easily portable into any edition that you want to run it into. Now, is it the equivalent of 2nd edition Spelljammer? No. This Spelljammer doesn't even have dragon ships in it, which I personally always found is kind of cool, but apparently it's not acceptable in this current version of Spelljammer. Instead, we get space galleons, along with a variety of other Spelljammer ships that are designed off of fish or insects. And with that, I end this review. I hope this helps somebody out there, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.